Has anyone ever shown you something that they thought they were really good at doing, but they clearly weren't? My 3-year-old daughter, she loves gymnastics, and she truly believes that her cartwheel is the best. She has no idea that what she's doing isn't even officially a cartwheel. But it doesn't matter. She believes she has the perfect cartwheel, and she keeps performing it over and over and over again. I, too, was once an overly optimistic 3-year-old. After watching the Radio City Rockettes perform in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, I declared I was going to join them when I grew up. I was unaware that they held the most elite dance contract in the world, or that hundreds of women auditioned each and every year for only a few spots. I just knew it in my soul. I belonged there, in sequins and a red lip, dancing with the Rockettes. I spent my childhood and my teenage years telling everyone that I met I was going to be a Rockette. I took class after class. I nursed blistered and bloody feet. I dipped in ice baths long before social media ever made those things popular. And even in my college years, when someone asked, "What are you really going to do with your life?" I replied, "Kick it with the Rockettes." So no one was more surprised than my 23-year-old self the day that I showed up to audition and was told I was too short. As I walked away in disbelief, I found myself immediately asking, how do I grow a half an inch taller? And it didn't take me long to find shoe lifts for people with height complexes. The next year, I showed up to audition, ready to rise to the occasion. Literally, I tucked those lifts inside my tights, and I got hired. Dancing with the Rockettes remains one of my proudest achievements, a testament to perseverance and resilience. And it was my relationship with failure that got me there, because I didn't associate the feelings of fear, disappointment, or shame, the acts of learning, overcoming obstacles, or having to try again. But I won't lie to you. As I got older, the desire for instant perfection and, well, my ego's need to hide my learning time from the world, it began to morph my relationship with failure. And I somehow forgot that there is a process to learning and achieving things, and social media played largely into that false belief. And I remember one of the biggest failures of my adult life, or so I thought at the time. So I noticed my direct deposit had been stopped. I was asked to meet with the owner of the company that I held my first executive position with. Our lunch meeting was scheduled in a fancy restaurant within a top-rated hotel in New York City. When I walked in, he greeted me with a smile and a hug, and we took our seats and the waiter poured our water. He began talking about my accomplishments, but I noticed that there was a paper check on the table beside him, so I said, "Hey, I didn't get my last paycheck," assuming it was mine there. He picked it up, and with a sly grin and a chuckle, said, "I should get something in return for this." It wasn't the first time that he had invited me to his hotel room, but it was the first time he'd withheld my pay with expectation that this time I would come. I got this lump in my throat where it felt like I couldn't swallow. You know that feeling where you're not sure if you're going to get words out without your voice cracking? Well, it pissed me off, so I reacted. And just like in a scene from a movie, I threw my glass of water in his face, I grabbed my purse, and I stormed out the restaurant. And as I was hailing a cab, feeling proud that I'd stood up for myself, it took only moments before the doubt came flooding in. I felt the heat in my body rising as I realized I just left my last 2 weeks of pay in that restaurant. I didn't know how I was going to make rent. I questioned how this was going to affect my future because I'd been in my first executive position for less than a year. I'd likely be labeled difficult to work with. And even though I knew he was the one that was wrong, he was the one who had messed up, I felt like a failure, and as if I didn't have control over my career. And I wondered, how am I going to pick myself up from this one? But then I had a flashback to that time that the Rockettes had told me I wasn't tall enough. It had never occurred to me at the time that that moment, it could have been the end of my Rockette dreams. But then, rather thinking I had failed and it was over, I was instantly looking for another way because I was good at dance. I wasn't delusional. I thought about how the younger version of myself never cared how messy the fall was. I was always going to get back up anyway. And I realized that me keeping my integrity and quitting my job, It didn't have to be the end of my career or even a negatively defining moment. It was that shift again in my relationship with failure where I started to understand this was happening for me. I was just back in the messy learning stage, learning what kind of executive and leader I wanted to be. Now, this is the part of the talk where anywhere outside of TEDx, I give you what's coined the hero story. And I tell you how I not only overcame this objection, but I went on to become a prominent figure in my industry. But since this is TEDx, I'm going to get right to the core of what it is I do and how it pertains to this idea and talk. I work with companies and their employees, helping them to reframe their relationship with failure, breaking their goals down into small steps that they action on daily, building confidence as they find solutions to roadblocks and achieve the desired results. Similar to the way one might break down how to do a cartwheel, step by step, encouraging daily practice until it's perfectly landed. And if I hadn't had my own missteps or failures and perceived failures, I wouldn't be traveling the globe reminding others failure is our friend and an essential part of the learning process. But it's going to take far more than just me to remind others of this, because the statistics on failure, they're alarming. 49% of Americans say that the fear of failure is preventing them from achieving their goals. Take note of that wording. The fear of failure is keeping over 170 million people from even trying to achieve their goals. Meanwhile, 46% of Britons won't even take on a new hobby, because they're afraid of failing. And an overwhelming 8 of 10 young adults feels that they're not good enough and that they will fail in life. The way that people view failure now, especially our young adults, it has to change. Social media's carefully curated highlight reels are not a true representation of how people achieve things or get from point A to point B in life. These reels, mini movies, they're perfectly chosen, heavily edited moments. And even then, they're still layered with a perfecting filter. And while they're oftentimes created with the intention of inspiring people, they're having the opposite effect, making people feel flawed, inadequate, as if we're failing by living here in reality, where we actually have to study, practice, overcome obstacles, and learn by failing until we no longer fail. How many of you have felt a tinge of jealousy when you logged into your socials and you saw the perfect pics posted by your neighbors on their trip to the Amalfi? Or maybe you felt like you were behind in life when your friend from college posted about their amazing business. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, your neighbors are filing for divorce. Your friend from college barely making ends meet, living off PB&J. If we reframe our relationship with failure and we commit to taking daily action towards our goals, even when flawed and imperfect, then and only then can we achieve what we once thought was impossible. Were we overly optimistic children when we remained unshaken by our missteps and our falls and we proudly showed them off? Or have we become overly self-critical and unrealistic adults, believing that if we can't achieve perfection on our first attempt, then failure is our inevitable stopping point, and therefore we shouldn't even try? It's time to not only challenge, but to fully reject the highlight reel narrative in order to reclaim the resilience of our childhood selves. You know, Aristotle said that we are what we repeatedly do, not what we do perfectly. And if, like children, we normalize failing and learning without disappointment or shame when we need to start over and try again, showing off our cartwheels, even when they aren't perfect, then each attempt, no matter how flawed or unhighlight reel worthy, will move us closer to accomplishing our goals. I mean, hey, if a 5'5.5" girl like me can magically turn 5'7" after a failure, what can you do? Think about it, and I'll see you on the kick line of life. Thank you.